child is, guess what? The heart begins to beat at 22 weeks. There's electrical brain. We can't see love, but we know it exists. And so don't be fooled by that, and again, you are free to make those arguments. I mean, the difficult cases, right, in incest, in rape, in these kinds of things, horrible circumstances that women in an abusive relationship. One of my best friends was married to a man who that's your child. And we can say that it's not really a child, but it really is a child. Because if that was a child that you planned, there'd be no question, right? And so it's really important. So where do we draw the line? Is it at a month? Is it at 6 months? Is it at 9 months? I mean, some states have a law where it's okay to kill the baby when he's coming out. And then what about after the baby's born? What if there's something wrong with the baby? Can we kill him then? I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it's not ridiculous, right? And so we really have to look at the truth of things. And it's hard. It's hard to look at that, right? And say, wow, that's tough. But those are our choices that we make, right? We make those decisions. And that's why the church is so insistent that sex has a meaning, and that meaning includes the possibility of new life. We can't deny that. Because there's going to come a time when you say, I want to have that baby. I want to have a baby. And now it changes. The meaning, well, how are you going to have a baby? I'm going to have sex with my husband. No kidding. Right? And so I am not denying that there are horrible situations and places where, it's probably not the best idea for a child to come into that person's life. But guess what? There's something called adoption. Which is the greatest gift. I work with couples who struggle with infertility all the time. And so when I hear about 1.2 million abortions in our country, post-Roe, I just think about the millions of couples that are struggling to have that child. That would do anything to take care of that child. It's 9 months of your life. And your child will never be anything but grateful to you for that. Which actually brings me to probably one of the best talks I've ever heard. Would you mind go hitting that red button again for me? Gianna Jensen, I don't know if any of you've ever heard of her, but I'm going to let her tell her story.
I'm adopted, and my biological mother was 17, and so was my biological father. She was 7.5 months pregnant when she decided to go to Planned Parenthood, which is the largest abortion provider in the world, and they counseled her to have a late-term saline abortion, which is a saline salt solution that is injected into the mother's womb. Baby gulps that solution, it burns the baby inside and out, and then she's to deliver a dead baby within 24 hours. And to everyone's great shock and surprise, I didn't arrive dead but alive on April the 6th, 1977 in a Los Angeles County abortion clinic. What's fantastic about this, about the perfect timing of my arrival, is that the abortionist was not on duty yet. So he wasn't even given the opportunity to continue on with his plan for my life, which was death. And I know that I am in a government building, and a beautiful one it is, and I love your country as well as my own. But I know in the age that we live in, it is not at all politically correct to to say the name of Jesus Christ in places like this. To bring him into these sorts of meetings because his name can make people so terribly uncomfortable. But I didn't survive so I could make everyone comfortable. I survived so I could stir things up a bit. And I had a great time doing it. And so I was delivered alive, as I've already said, after 18 hours. I should be blind, I should be burned, I should be dead. And yet I am not. You know what is fantastic vindication is the fact that the abortionist had to sign my birth certificate. So I know who he is. And it also says, for any skeptic listening, on my medical records, born during saline abortion. Ha! They didn't win. I've done some research on the man that performed the abortion on me. And his clinics are the largest chain of clinics in the United States of America, and they gross $70 million a year. I read him say, I read a quote from him at some point several years ago, and he said, I have aborted over 1 million babies, and I consider it my passion. I tell you these things because, listen, ladies and gentlemen, we are in an interesting battle, whether we realize it or not, in this world. It is a battle between life and death. What side are you on? So a nurse called an ambulance and had me transferred to a hospital, which is absolutely miraculous. Generally, the practice at the time, and up until 2002, was, in my country, was to end the life of an abortion survivor by strangulation, suffocation, leaving the baby there to die, or throwing the baby away. But on August the 5th, 2002, my extraordinary President Bush signed into law the Born Alive Infants Protection Act to prevent that from occurring anymore. You see, we're playing for keeps. We're playing for, I'm hoping to be hated by the time that I die so that I can feel God about me and understand what it was to be hated. He was hated. Christ was hated. And not that I look forward to being hated, but I know along my journey, I know I'm already hated because I declare life. I say, you didn't get me. The silent Holocaust didn't win over me. And my mission, ladies and gentlemen, among many things, is this: to infuse humanity into a debate that we have just compartmentalized and set on a shelf and said it is an issue. We have removed our emotions. We are becoming harder. Do you really want that? How much are you willing to take, and how much are you willing to risk to speak the truth in love and graciousness and stand up and at least be willing to be hated? Or at the end of the day, is it all about you? Or me? And so, after that, I was placed in an emergency foster care home, where they decided they didn't like me very well, and as I'm fond of saying, I don't know how you could not adore me right from the start. What is wrong with these people? But they didn't. You see, I've been hated since conception by so many, and loved by so many more, but most especially by God. I'm his girl. Compelled to say this. If abortion is merely about women's rights, ladies and gentlemen, then what will I? There was not a radical feminist standing up and yelling about how my rights were being violated that day. In fact, my life was being snuffed out in the name of women's rights. And ladies and gentlemen, I would not have cerebral palsy had I not survived all of this. So when I hear the appalling, disgusting argument that we should have abortions because the child just might be disabled, oh, the horror that fills my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, there are things that you will only be able to learn by the weakest among us. And when you snuff them out, you are the one that loses. The Lord looks after them, but you are the one that will suffer forever. And what arrogance, what absolute arrogance, and it has been an argument for so long in this human place that we live, that the stronger should dominate the weaker, should determine who lives or dies. The arrogance of that, don't you realize that you cannot make your own heart beat? Don't you realize that all the power that you think you possess, you really possess none of it? It is the mercy of God that sustains you, even when you hate Him.
You want to watch the rest of that, which I really encourage you to. She kind of goes on and she talks to both women and men and really encourages them to stand up for what is good and what is true. She actually met her biological mother. She came to one of her talks, and she says it so beautifully. She said, I've met my biological mother. I've forgiven my biological mother. I'm a Christian. And so just really powerful. Then her mother approached her very hatefully, which was unfortunate. But any comments or questions? She's very powerful speaker.
I guess I don't know what the view or your view is of when the mother's life is in danger.
Yes, good question.
Because that's something that I feel like hospitals define the abortion procedure. It's a very broad definition.
Yes.
Even when it's medically necessity,
Right.
it's a medical necessity, they still say it's an abortion, even though it may be a procedure that's supposed to save the mother's life.
Yes, that's actually important. So the medical term for abortion actually is the same. Abortion can be a miscarriage, which is actually not an elective abortion. Elective abortion is when we actually make a decision to terminate the life of the child, and that's an intentional, direct termination of the child's life. So that's a very medical term, and we use it when you say abortion, you mostly think of an elective abortion. So abortion medically can really refer to an abortion that we call a spontaneous abortion. We usually don't feel a spontaneous case. The other thing is for the life of the mother, and I think that that's really important. The church actually says that the life of the mother is just as important as the life of the child, and that everything must be done to save both lives. Oftentimes, the life of the mother is the one that is actually the only one that can be saved, like in an ectopic pregnancy or something, but we still don't directly abort the child. And that's actually, I teach a healthcare ethics class in the spring, and we kind of go into that. That there are ways in which we focus on the life of the mother, we do everything, and it's called a double effect. So there's two effects to a possible action that we enter into, and one of them, we know it's going to happen. Like in an ectopic pregnancy, we know when we do this thing to save the mother's life, the baby's going to die. But directly killing the baby. And so it's called double effect. And so again, we're concerned about both, and if we could make both live, we would, but we will save the life of the mother, and as a result of saving her life, the baby dies. Be like if a mother had uterine cancer, and she was pregnant. It would be okay, according to the church, to treat the uterine cancer, acknowledging that the baby is probably going to die as a result of that. We've had, and I'm going to show you the life of Gianna Mola, who was actually a mother that was pregnant, and she made a decision to not treat because she wanted to save the life of her child. Now that's heroic virtue. Church doesn't call us for that. And she did it, and unfortunately she did die. Actually, not from the chemo. From lack of chemo, she died because she didn't get married. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, I think we've talked about this already, and I think I've talked about it when we talked about, have we talked about this? And have I talked about how the evidence and the research has shown that cohabitation is actually a lousy preparation for marriage? So the church teaches that living with someone outside of marriage is deeply sinful, right? And that's because cohabitation usually assumes that you're doing everything that you would normally do in marriage, but you haven't actually made a commitment to the person. Okay? And so it's kind of the same thing as sex outside of marriage. Okay, and this is deeply problematic. Jesus talks about it in the New Testament. Fornication is a sin. Fornication means sex outside of marriage. And so cohabitation, that includes cohabitation, it also includes premarital sex. So why is that problematic? We've just defined love as being total, free, faithful, and fruitful. So when someone's cohabiting, is that authentic love? Are they giving themselves totally? It's impossible for them to. They have not given them forever. They're holding back. They're saying, well, I want this part of you, but not this part, that part of you. Are they open to the possibility of life? Probably not. So they're probably contraceptive in some way. Are they being faithful? Well, they are until they meet somebody else, because that's why they're not actually getting married, right? Because something better might come along. And so cohabitation is living in advance of what Christ calls us to. It's living in advance of that. You know, marriage calls for total commitment, it's a covenant. Till death do us apart. And that's what couples promise on the altar. They say, the priest in our tradition asks the couple, have you come here freely? Because sometimes people don't feel like they have to get married because they're pregnant. I have to get married because I'm pregnant. Church actually does not say that. The church says you shouldn't be having sex outside of marriage or you wouldn't be pregnant. But you shouldn't get married because you're pregnant. In fact, we have several women that have been in our marriage preparation process that are pregnant, and we say, well, we want you to have the baby first. We want you to have that baby first, and make sure that this is really, what you're called to, marriage with this person. And all of them have done that, and it's worked out very well. And all have decided to get married after that. But they've entered in knowing what marriage is. And so, so cohabitation, and especially for you ladies, we rule the world and we don't know it. But, somebody that wants to live with you before marriage isn't willing to go the distance with you. Don't you hold out for what you deserve. Hold out for what you deserve. You're worth that. You're worth that. And you want somebody that's willing to die for you. And guys, you want somebody that you're willing to die for. That's what love is. Right? And that's something that's very beautiful. And this is not love. Research has shown that 1 out of 10 couples that actually cohabitate actually end up at the altar and get married. Those that do get married, they fall into marriage because it's kind of the next thing to do. Research has proven this. 80% increased risk of divorce if you've cohabited
say hello to
Oh,
better
hit
health.
the skip.
Hi, welcome to Signify Health. Nice to meet you.
For over in years, millions of people have invited Signify Health into their homes to take the time to get to know them and really listen to their concerns. And to do it at no cost, fully covered by their health plans. Visit hellosignify.com or call 855-984-5121 to see if you're eligible.
Hey, this is Jackie and Bobby Angel with Ascension Presents. This is the second video in our series about birth control, contraception, and natural family planning. And today we're going to talk about why we don't use contraception.
So go watch the first one if you haven't already. Jackie's got a lot of good information on why you should ditch the pill, which will inform where we're going today, why we don't use contraception in our marriage, and why, as a Catholic Church, we're not on board with contraception.
Okay, this is a tough topic, I know, and actually this was part of my conversion into falling in love with my Catholic faith. This was one of the three things. First of all, I fell in love with the Eucharist, and I was inspired by the faith of some young people when I was 18. But the third thing that really was like the tipping point was that one of my leaders was sharing about how she and her fiance and soon-to-be husband were going to be using natural family planning, and all the girls sitting in the room were like, "Oh, that's great," and I was just sitting there very uncomfortable because I didn't know that the church was against contraception. And so I just had this pit, like this, I was really uncomfortable. And so if you're watching this video and you're at all uncomfortable, you know, it's okay, because I feel like sometimes when our hearts are here and the truth is over here, it's uncomfortable to kind of bring those two together. So I went home from that week-long retreat and I started studying up on the church's teaching, and I was like, what? This is beautiful. The more I learned, the more I realized that this actually is so pro-woman. It's so pro-woman because it puts the ball in the woman's court, because of the fact that contraception is one of the ways that men can easily use women, because, you know, they don't have to worry about pregnancy. So in our marriage, the reason we don't use contraception and it's so appealing not to use contraception is, number one, I don't want to put a bunch of hormones in my body. You know, I try to be healthy and try to make the decisions with my food. And so if I'm not going to eat all these like hormone-induced foods, and I'll eat more, you know,